Hi everyone, welcome back to our study of All Summer in a Day. So you worked with this story for 2 days at this point. The first day you went through and made some comments on it, and the second day I tried to give you some terminology to look at it a little more closely. Today I wanted to give you a model of what some of my comments look like and what some of your comments might look like when you're approaching it with all those story elements. So again, to keep in mind, we're looking at plot, we're looking at conflict, we're looking at setting, we're looking at characters, we're looking at author's craft, and we're looking at theme. So those are some of the things that we're going to note when we read. So what I'm going to do is for each section of the story, I won't go through and reread the whole thing, but I'll leave it up for a second so you can see this is the section I'm commenting on, and then show you what was the thing that I commented on. So in the beginning of the story, I like to call it world building. I feel like in a sci-fi story, they're letting you know what this place is like. So I really focused in on setting. So that was the first thing that I noted. And I said, in this part of the text, I learned the most about where the story takes place. They're on Venus, which is obviously a completely different planet, but the author takes a lot of time to make us aware of this and what it's like there. So on Venus, he says, it had been raining for 7 years and for thousands upon thousands of days. So I think that not only is it important that it's raining here, but that it's just constantly going and it's so oppressive. So that's the first thing that kind of stands out to me in the story. I thought that I would focus in on setting. So again, that's what I'm asking you guys to look at when you're going through and commenting with these different story elements. Say, okay, I see setting standing out. What do I think about setting? So that's my example of a model for looking at setting. So now we have our second part of the story. And here we get some descriptions about Margot. We get some interactions with the kids. So my comment here was on character. I felt like at the beginning of the story, we got what the place was like. Now we're starting to see how it affects some of the people. So for character, I thought that the author emphasizes Margot and her differences in this section. She's the only one of the children that's able to remember the sun because she grew up in Ohio and she saw it when she was 4. And there's this tension there because all the other kids don't remember ever seeing the sun. But aside from that difference, we get descriptions about Margot and how she's apart from the others through the way that she looks. So she's a frail girl. She's lost in the rain. The rain had washed out the blue from her eyes. So we can see how much living on this planet has taken from her. It's kind of washed out not just the way she looks, but who she is. So I thought understanding Margot in this second part of the story was really important. So again, focusing in on some of the terminology with story elements, character is the piece that I'm looking at here. As you're going back through a story and you're doing this naturally, you'll have these story elements repeat. Like I might talk about character in 3 story sections in a row, but for the purposes of today's assignment, I'm just going to make sure that I touch on each story element once. So our next section, we get a little more tension between the children. And here I want to focus on conflict. So we get the description of Margot, we see the difference, but now it's starting to become a problem. So I'm thinking, I kind of know where this problem's coming from. I want to start seeing how it impacts them. So she was different, they knew her difference. They hated her possible future, that she had the ability to possibly have the sun in her life more. So the difference between these other kids and Margot starts becoming more of a thing here, and we see the other children getting angry. I don't think they hate Margot as much as they hate the idea and the opportunities that she has, that she's able to experience these things that they're not. So they're kind of coming about or manifesting themselves in anger towards Margot. So we see some like human emotion going on in there between them. So that's me focusing in on conflict. So for this next section, they're outside, they're playing in the rain, Margot is not there. I'm going to focus it on author's craft. So with author's craft is really what's something that the author is choosing to do to emphasize something in the story. So here I thought that with the descriptions, the author spends a lot of time talking about the rain going away. And that's what I think the biggest difference is. When that rain goes away, there's just this, it sounds different, it looks different, it feels different, and the author wants you to see that. So he takes the time to talk about first, something had gone wrong with the sound, like there's not that rain going on anymore. And then second, there was a beautiful tropical slide inserted. So it became sunny, it became beautiful out. I think that that difference in taking the time to explain that difference shows, again, how oppressive the rain was, and that through that change, the children start going into a frenzy. Like they start running around and screaming like wild animals, and we see that they're not really able to control their actions anymore. So I thought that noticing author's craft here becomes really important for kind of seeing how the story plays out the way that it does. And here we have the rain starting to come back. The sun's about to go away. and then we get the end of the story where they let Margot out. So for the ending, I commented on the last two parts. So plot, I thought that the way the story ended was interesting. It ends with letting Margot out. I thought that there could be a whole nother story told about once Margot gets out, how do these kids feel? How do they react to each other? How does the teacher punish these children? But instead, the author just stops there. I think it ends like that, or what kind of my reaction to it ending like that is that we're supposed to focus on this animal-like nature of the children. They're pent up for years under the rain, and they have all this energy that's just like buried deep down, and they're all very depressed. And when the sun comes out, it all comes out, and they go wild. And then at the end, they kind of have to hide it away again, and we see it with that solemn finish. But the story, instead of ending with a confrontation or an interaction, it kind of just ends with the shame of the students, and it says they stood as if someone had driven them like so many stakes into the floor. So I think that kind of sends a really strong message for what happened between these kids and Margot. So I think that the way that the plot was constructed there is what stood out to me. And then finally, that leads me to my final thoughts and comments on theme. I think for a story, there are lots of different themes that can be added onto it, so this is just one that I'm pulling out. So I think that this one of the things the story is trying to show is how little control of our actions we have sometimes. These children are kind of products of everything around them. They have this setting, the oppressive reign of Venus, that turns them into wild animals. They give into the mob mentality of shoving her into a closet. We have one kid that kind of stands up and says, hey, let's push her in a closet, and everybody else is like, yeah, let's do it. Then they run around wildly while the sun is out, so we just see how like animalistic they are. And then the children gave into something bigger than themselves, their environment, the people around them. So it goes back to one of my previous comments of them being more angry at the circumstances more so than Margot herself. And then at the end of the story, they have to pay for those actions, and they feel the consequences of being ashamed and knowing that they kind of put this on themselves, or they caused this situation. So I thought the story was about how our actions sometimes take control of us, and we don't really have the time to think about them. I think there's a lot more about the interactions between them that I could pull out a lot of different themes, but I thought that that kind of quiet, solemn, ashamed feeling at the end is what really stayed with me as the story ended. And when Margot comes out, she comes out quietly, and then it's just over. So those are my comments looking at the story with story elements. What I'd like you to do for this assignment is to look at how do some of these comments match up with what you were reading or seeing in the story with some of the comments that you made. Did you see theme in the same way I did? Did you focus on the same character thing, or were you seeing things differently? And how did my comments add to your understanding of the story, or how did your comments kind of differ from mine and give a different perspective on it? So share some of that in today's assignment.